And now for tonight, we have Rod Stanley with us. Rod handles so many things out at Appomattox for us. He's education supervisor. He deals with our public programs and with the visitors. So he keeps the place running out there, or helps keep it running, and has been with the museum for a little over 5 years. And he will be sharing about Farmville's Israel Hill community. So I'm going to turn the screen over to Rod and let him take it away.
All right. Thanks, Kelly. If I hadn't noticed, but if there's anyone from Kansas City there, my condolences. All right. But greetings from the middle of Appomattox County. Like any good production, however, we need to pay our bills. So you're going to have to suffer through a short commercial. Any detailed historical information that I give you, especially concerning the Israel Hill Free Blacks and their interactions with judicial system, is coming from this book. All right, it's Israel on the Appomattox by Melvin Ely. He is a history and I can't remember, Black Studies scholar at the College of William and Mary. Do yourself a favor, get the book. You'll be better for reading it. You will also help Dr. Ely, and you'll also help the museum, because believe it or not, you can get it through our museum shop at acwm.org. And that's the end of the QVC channel. All right, so let's get to what we're supposed to be talking about. One thing though, however, from reading this book, it's going to greatly challenge your paradigms that you have concerning free Black society in the South before the Civil War. All right, so let me share my screen here. All right, there we go. First things first, free Blacks. What are they? All right. Now, before COVID-19 visited our shores, hold on a sec, I lost myself. There, there we go. Yeah. Before COVID-19 visited our shores, I used to give tours through our Civil War cabin that's on our property here in Appomattox. And I would lead student groups, family groups with adults through there, show them the cabin, the implements, furniture that's inside, and I'd ask the general question, who lived in this cabin? And it was either going to be a free white family, farm family, or an enslaved family, or a free Black family. And somewhere around 50-50, people thought it was either a white farming family or an enslaved family's cabin. No one ever said that this could have been a free Black family's cabin. As a matter of fact, probably somewhere around half of the adults didn't even realize there were free Blacks in the South before the war. So I don't want to assume anything on how much you know about that. So free Blacks before the war. There's obviously 3.9 million Blacks are enslaved in the slaveholding states and territories. There's 500,000 free Blacks in the free states and in the southern slaveholding states. About 220 are up north, and about 280,000 are actually in the slaveholding states and territories. Majority of them live out in the rural communities, out in the counties. Okay, they'll be grouped together, usually family members. They'll have a couple of homes together. All right, mainly for safety. Okay, as far as the cities, the largest city that has a free Black population is Baltimore, with about 30,000. Most of the other cities in the South, like Richmond, Savannah, Charleston, they'll have 2,000 to 3,000 free Blacks in them. Now, you might think this is kind of a strange picture to be having here. Our story is going to evolve around the actions of Richard Randolph. He is the son of a very well-to-do man, large holdings here in Prince Edward and Cumberland counties. Okay, a very successful, very affluent family. Okay, probably the biggest name in Virginia is the Randolphs. However, Israel Hill would not have happened if it wasn't for a person that's in this picture, and that is George Wythe. He is a law professor, teaches philosophy, languages at the College of William and Mary, and Richard Randolph attends his classes at the college. George Wythe is also a huge believer and teacher of the Enlightenment movement. This is the movement of reason, individualism, natural senses, but most importantly, the belief of freedom is a human right. And he's going to teach that to his students, which includes John Marshall, James Monroe, Henry Clay, and this long, tall drink of water right here, Thomas Jefferson. George Wythe doesn't gain much respect in history unless maybe you live in Wythe County or Wytheville, Virginia, because even in this painting, he's right here. He's half of a face, okay? And on the back of the $2 bill, he's gone. He's cropped off, right? Even though he was the first Virginian to sign the Declaration of Independence, right? So our story centers on Richard Randolph. He is Thomas Jefferson's first cousin, younger cousin. Richard is going to totally embrace this concept of enlightenment. Well, this is a historical marker, north side of Farmville. So bizarre, appropriately enough, that's the name of the plantation that Richard Randolph lives. His grandfather had built it. Richard's dad had died when Richard was 5 years old. His mother remarries St. George Tucker, excellent relationship there. St. George Tucker is also a student of George Wythe. Okay. You'll notice on this marker, Richard's not even mentioned in it. He's kind of been put into the compost of history. Okay. The Randolphs, it is said that no one's good enough for a Randolph except for another Randolph. Richard's parents were cousins. Richard marries his cousin, Judith. Right. Two big events that are going to transpire that's really going to greatly influence Richard's life and death. First happens in 1792. Richard and Judith have been married 3 years. They had decided to attend a gathering, a party at one of their cousins' house in Cumberland County, about 30 miles north. And Judith takes along her 17-year-old sister, Nancy. They get up there to the Glentavere plantation, which is for sale for those who would be interested. There's screams in the middle of the night. In the morning, they discover a stillborn baby on top of a pile of wooden shakes. They were still completing the plantation home. There's a huge scandal. I mean, if there's a book by that name, Scandal of Bizarre, huge public innuendos that it was Richard's baby. He's obviously, he and his wife are shaken by this. Richard initiates a public inquiry to clear his name. He hires the best lawyers available. Patrick Henry, all right, give me liberty, give me death. John Marshall, our fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Well, they get him off. Okay. The second major event actually happened the year before, 1791. Richard becomes of age. He is 21 years old. He gets the entire bazaar plantation grounds and property. And back then, you know what property also includes? It includes human property. He's given almost 200 enslaved people. This goes totally against what he has totally believes in, the Enlightenment. He gets a great emotional quandary. He's really in a dilemma, mental strain. Right? It's going to take him a couple years. He's going to write his will, 1796. This is the most amazing anti-slavery manifesto or tirade I've seen. It's going to be greater than any abhorrence of slavery that any Northern abolitionist is ever going to say. All right, just read some of these things. George Wyth's Enlightenment is brought to life and in practice. You know, mortgaged all his slaves to British harpies. He's talking about his dad mortgaged his enslaved to pay for his brother's highfalutin living and gambling debts, right? To make retribution to an unfortunate race of bondmen whom my ancestors have exercised the most lawless and monstrous tyranny, contradiction of their own Declaration of Rights. Richard is a son of the Revolution. He's talking about the Declaration of Independence. To impress my children with the just horror at a crime so enormous. On down, I truly declare, nay, my most anxious wish that my Negroes, all of them, oops, you're in my way there, Kelly. All right, be liberated. Here's the key line. I do devise, give, and bequeath to them 400 acres given to heads of families. In 2 months, Richard's dead. We don't know why. Richard's brother John says that he was in excellent health, but he dies. There's no indication anywhere of how he died. You can make your own decision on that. So Israel Hill, 400 acres. This is a Google Earth shot. Outlined here is 350 acres is actually what happened. Don't know what happened to the other 50. All right, it's up on a bluff. This is the high bluffs. It's about 200 feet on down to the Buffalo River that flows into the Appomattox River here. The bazaar plantation was right up here on these bluffs. All right. The town of Farmville, 2 miles away. If we were doing this live, which I certainly wish we would be right here, which is Three Roads Brewery, all right? Longwood University down in here. All right, so the 350 acres is broken up into 25 to 50 acre tracts and given to the heads of the families, the Gibbses, the Johnsons, the Pattersons, Giles, and the Whites family. The Whites family is going to be one of the largest patriotic families of this Israel Hill. They call themselves Israelites because this was the promised land. It took Judith Randolph 15 years, okay, because Richard dies in 96. It's not till 1811 that they are actually all totally manumitted and freed. Wow. They spend the first couple of years clearing the land, farming, and engaging in other trades down in Farmville. So this is a postcard kind of showing Israel Hill, 1903. Israel Appomattox River's behind you. This is Buffalo River. So actually Israel Hill is actually slightly off to the right. But even in 1903, you can see the rural nature of the area. This bridge and road across Buffalo Creek, it didn't exist for 30 years. It wasn't built until the 1840s. So this is really going to limit the amount of skilled trade jobs going on at Israel Hill. because it was just a bridle path going from Farmville to there. So no blacksmith shops or cooperages or shoe and boot makers are going to be created on Israel Hill itself. When it's created, 1811, in Prince Edward County, there's 5,000 white inhabitants. There's 7,000 enslaved, and 149 free blacks right before the additional about 90 to 100 joined Israel Hill. So what are these free blacks doing before Israel Hill is created? Well, they're surviving. They're prospering. They're farmers. They're blacksmiths, the coopers, the carpenters, the millers. They're engaged in Farmville's community, economy, and society. And a good example is this $200 debt bond here, 1804. It's signed by who's wanting this $200? A free black man of Farmville, Ben Shorts. Okay, he's going to buy 25 acres right south of town. He's going to invite about 24 other free blacks to build their homes there. He's a shoe and boot maker. Most striking thing about this, though, and I wish I'd been with Dr. Ely when he found this in the records there at Prince Edward's courthouses, is Ben Short's signature. Okay, remember, this is a black man, a free black man, but he's signing his name, and it just drips with or oozes with determination and pride and accomplishment. You can imagine him just sketching out his name there. He's even adding in this curlicueness right here. Okay, it wasn't until 1831, after the Nat Turner Rebellion, that the education of blacks was illegal in Virginia. So up in that time, you could educate them. But let's speak about the legal and justice system and how that is being applied to the free blacks. Now, obviously, they're a second-class citizen, and I put that in air quotes. They can't vote, they can't be on a jury, they can't testify against a white man, they can't be in the militia, but they are going to use the law and the justice system to their full advantage. And this is where this book just breaks all the paradigms of these free blacks hiding in the shadows, because they are not. So these are some of the examples of the many examples that are in the book of these free blacks using the law to their advantage. Okay, so just little snippets. First one, Hercules White. He's probably the major patriarch of Israel Hill. He and his 4 sons. He sues George Backus because he didn't pay his $70 debt owed to Hercules. All right. He wins this case. Now, also, what's amazing is here's this white guy getting a loan from a free black person. All right. Syphax Brown, he was Richard's dad's personal servant. He sues his neighbor because his neighbor kills Syphax's roaming hogs that were going through his neighbor's cornfield, and he wins. All right. Now, that's kind of strange. You'd think the neighbor could sue Syphax because his hogs destroyed his corn crop. But the judge ruled that hogs were really important back then, all right? And that farmer had shot and killed Syphax's his living, his subsistence, all right? James Dungy, he's black. He lives a couple miles west of Israel Hill. He marries Elizabeth Fears, his neighbor, who's white. Okay, there's going to be about a half dozen interracial marriages in the county here. He petitions the county to have a road built in front of his farm, and the county says sure. So obviously, there's no animosity there, even with this interracial marriage. Hampton Giles, here, Israel Hill. He's sued by a plantation owner because the plantation owner says he wasn't paid for the enslaved carpenter that Hampton used. The owner lost, had to pay Giles damages. So there's an example of, here's a free black using enslaved labor. And there are, in the written records, Israel Hill, free blacks and others in the county owning enslaved people. In most cases, those are family members. We aren't 100% sure if some others were not family members. We don't know for sure. Edmund Young. The Young family is the most litigated family in the county, right? Free black man, he's squatting on 800 acres of land that hasn't been used in about 100 years. It's been owned by a Scottish man company. Right? He's sued by the county. He wins after 3 appeals. Nope, that is his land. Then he's charged with arson because the county decide, well, we're going to build the poorhouse on part of that land anyway. And mysteriously, the superintendent's house burns down. So they charge him. He's acquitted. Okay. Fornication. All right, that's not against Edmund, but it's against his 2 sons. They marry 2 white women. All right. So in this case, there was obviously someone who had a problem with an interracial marriage, but the case was dropped by the judges. Right? And previously, Edmund had sued a white man for assault, and he won. Zach Ellis, he's sued by Colonel James Madison. Now, it's not the president, but I do want you to remember that name. For assault, obviously, Zach, as a black man, cannot testify against this white man. But 7 other white men do testify against James Madison. Took them 3 juries to figure it out, and well, they didn't figure it out. They couldn't reach a verdict. But Madison did pay Ellis's expenses. Thomas Bowman, he's sued by his white employer for wages lost. He had a contract, and the employer fired him for questionable grounds. Tom brought him to court, and he won $40 plus his costs. $40, that's a lot of money back then. The cabin I showed you, the second slide, that was worth about $50. Okay, so $40, quite a bit of money. 20 years later, he brings another case against a assault case by a white man, and he wins that. The county also had very casual enforcement of the free black registration laws. If you're a free black, you have to carry your papers on you. Right? On the books is if someone catches you, you don't have your papers, you can't prove that you're free. You could be enslaved. That doesn't happen. Right? There's no fines, there's no servitude, and in some cases they let it slip for 40 years in one case or a person. And then there's the casual confiscation of blacks owning firearms after the Nat Turner revolt. The state legislature did pass a law they cannot own firearms. The county confiscated them, they sold them off in auction, and they turned the money over to the previous owners of the guns. Within a couple years, they're back buying firearms again. Now, I don't want you to come away from this thinking that I'm describing a utopian free society, a nirvana for these free blacks. It is obviously not. I'll just part with you one case, an example. Thomas Bowman here. His brother, Phil Bowman, he marries an enslaved woman, very common, okay? Prissy is her name. She's owned by William Allen, the next door neighbor to Israel Hill, all right? 1819, United States first depression hits, and it's a doozy. I mean, businesses are going out of business. Commodity prices have dropped to nothing. People are losing their jobs. Therefore, people are calling in their debts. All right. And so William Allen is about to go bankrupt because he is heavily in debt, like most plantation owners are. So he puts on the auction block 4 of his enslaved people, one of whom is Prissy. So here's Phil Bowman. His wife's up on the auction block. Now just imagine that. If you're sitting next to someone you love, look at them in the eye right now. All right, go ahead, do it. They aren't going to hurt you. Okay. Imagine them up on a auction block, and there's not a damn thing that law can do for you. The law is on the side of the auctioneer and the debt owner. All right. So what are you going to do? Well, he does the only thing he can do. He works at a grist mill, the Venable mill. And he's been working there for years. He knows the son of the owner very well. They work side by side. He asks him, lend me the money. I'm going to bid on my wife. And he does. Robert Venable lends him the money. We don't know exactly how much he went for. The bill does not exist. It's the bill of sale. But we're talking hundreds and hundreds of dollars, if not $1,000. All right. He lends him the money. Could you imagine bidding for your husband or wife? But anyway, pretty sad, but he wins. Okay. But just the fact that he had to do that. Yeah, my ears are getting red just thinking about it. Okay. So now you can look at this 2 ways. All right. The cynic in me could say, well, all right, here's the owner's son saying, oh, we can get Phil Bowman here, tie in with the debt that he's going to have to work it off at our mill for the next 20 years at even cheaper wages, basically putting him into an indentured servitude, okay, which is like 1 ring up the ladder from being enslaved. That's the cynic. The other side, maybe it was an act of compassion on Robert Venable. It's obviously they've worked together. They could have been friends. All right. He just saw a man who was going to lose his loved one. And I do believe it's the latter. It's the compassion, because Phil is going to work for them for 20 years. He's going to live in a subsidized home on a lot, subsidized by the Venable families. And after Phil dies, they take care of his wife for years afterwards. Okay. So hopefully it's that way. So as I said, Phil's a miller. So just what are the other free blacks in Israel Hill doing to support themselves? So this is a list of occupations of the heads of the families on Israel Hill. It's taken from the Free Negro list that's done. It's a census done every year. And what I want you to do is really look at 1850 here. We're on our 2nd and 3rd generations of families on Israel Hill. They're successful, members of the community, but you'll notice that most of them are boatmen. Right? Just a few farming, and as I'd said earlier, there are very few craftsmen or tradesmen. Okay, so we'll come back to this in a bit, but exactly what is the boatman? Okay, before railroads existed, and even once they did exist, but in the large areas that are not covered by them, the main transport for transporting goods and commerce is on the rivers, right? And the bateau, and here's an example of one here in the Richmond Canal, actually very near where our Tredegar Museum is, was the most effective method, especially going along these shallow rivers. Picture on the right is the Appomattox River there in Farmville, relatively shallow, but these boats are amazing. They're 60 feet long. 6 feet wide. They're powered by two men who are walking along the gunwales here, actually walking the boat along with their poles. You have a headman here who steers and is usually the owner of the boat. They can hold 5 to 8 tons of goods, and it's only drawing 20 inches of water. Really amazing. So they can go up these very shallow rivers. So they can put on maybe 10 hogshead of tobacco, 1,000 pounds of peace, plus some other goods. So they are transporting close to $1,000 worth of goods from Farmville down to Petersburg. Okay. These are highly skilled, entrepreneurial people. Most of them own these boats. They're worth about $50 to $60. You've got to be reliable. Obviously, you've got to be strong to do this and extremely trustworthy. These merchants are putting $1,000 worth of their goods in the hands of these men. Right? And these men are also being held responsible by their mark on the bill of lading when they leave and when they pick up stuff down in Petersburg. These guys are engaging in a freedom of movement that most, certainly no enslaved person has, but even other free blacks don't have. That you just don't experience at home. These trips take 2 to 3 weeks round trip down to Petersburg and back. They're fraternizing, they're camping, they're sharing meals with the other white bateaumen. It's a very enviable and profitable career. But as a Greek philosopher said, change is the only constant in life. Something happens. Let's go back to that chart. Look here, starting in 53, then up to 60, the number of boatmen just crashes. They go to farming, and eventually that doesn't even, they don't even do that. Most of them start working in the factories. 8 of them are working just laborers on farms, just farm laborers. 3 of them are just working their patch. That means just working their subsistence farming on Israel Hill. So what brings about this tremendous change, right? It's a transportation technology transformation. And that is the completion of the South Side Railroad, going from Petersburg through Farmville to Lynchburg. And the biggest obstacle was building of High Bridge. It's over a half-mile long, goes over the Appomattox River Valley here. Farmville is about 5 miles that way. They completed that in about 52 or 1853. The bateaumen were transporting stone and brick up to this location. Little did they know that they were bringing about their economic demise while they were doing that. Side note, this is a great 30-mile rail-to-trail Virginia State Park today. You can walk across the bridge that replaced this one in 1914, but you look over and you see all those stone pillars. It's just a phenomenal state park. Please visit. So you're going to have all these loss of these high-paying jobs and business opportunities. Let's see what the press has to say about all this. All right, there's a lot here. Okay, it's quite obvious. Free blacks cannot be successful according to the doctrine of the enslaved holding South, right? They obviously have to have white supervision or they're just going to degrade as a people. Right? If they succeed, it's only going to prove them wrong. So what I have here are 3 different cases of high points of news across the country concerning Israel Hill. Right? The first one on the left, these are just small snippets of actually relatively large articles. This is written by Colonel James Madison. Remember, he's the one who beat Zach Ellis, okay, and lost his lawsuit. But look at the descriptions: idleness, poverty, prostitute themselves, heavy tax on the community, worsted by the exchange from slavery to liberty. This is printed 1836 in the Farmer's Register. That is an agronomy periodical printed in Petersburg. And this is what the editor thinks of it here. Facts are well stated, a very well fair trial of Negro emancipation. I like this. Prefer boating to all others, nearest to idleness. You'd think they're going on river cruises or something. Let's go back to that. Editor. Edmund Ruffin. Okay. Today, he is known as the father of soil sciences. Right? He was very good at that, and I just wish he would have stuck with it, because he's also a very strong, avid secessionist and a pro-slavery rights propagandist. Obviously, he had not attended College of William & Mary and gone to George Wyth's Enlightenment classes. The next one, the New York Times, 1854. Few miserable huts. These are terrible. Deceased, depraved, pest neighbors, drunkards, corrupt women, prostitutes, children, syphilitic. Yeah. All right. This is also in the Chicago papers, Philadelphia. It's been picked up and passed everywhere. It was first printed in the Baltimore Patriot. The editor of the Baltimore Patriot also owns the DeBow Review. It is an agronomy periodical, just like the Farmer's Register was, printed in New Orleans and Charleston. Right. Who is the chief correspondent of the DeBow Review? Edmund Ruffin. Right. Let's fast forward 4 more years. Right. In the Daily Constitutionalist, Georgia, it's also picked up and is plastered newspapers across the country, especially in the South. Yeah, women-led idle, distant lies, rotten bureau, dishonest means, freedom has not been a blessing. All right, read this. When 2 races attempt to occupy the same territory, the weaker must give way to the stronger and more enlightened, or occupy to their superiors the relation of slaves. F.N. Watkins, Francis Watkins. He is a judge. He is a planter there in Farmville. He knows the free whites or the free blacks very well. I want you to remember his name because he'll come back again later. He is answering a letter requesting information on Israel Hill by none other than Edmund Ruffin. Okay. Edmund Ruffin, yeah, 2 months after Robert E. Lee surrenders, he's going to go upstairs in his son's house in Amelia County, right north of Prince Edward. He's going to drape himself in a Confederate flag, whatever that means, many of them. He's going to put the muzzle of an 1842 Springfield musket into his mouth, and he's going to pull the trigger. As I said, he is an avid secessionist, and he would not live under the rule of Yankees. Right. So I put all this under the term of fake news. You got to make sure you know where your news is coming from. We can learn that today, too. All right. Obviously, free blacks are doing better than that in Israel Hill. They say a picture speaks 1,000 words, or in this case, a signature. So this is a guardian bond for an 18-year-old free black woman, Harriet Smith. She wants Philip White, who's the grandson of Hercules White, right, to be her guardian. So they take this bond to the county clerk. County clerk, just want you to envision this, gives Phil White the pen. After the clerk first makes the square, the legal square for someone to make their mark, their X. Okay, you do that by the clerk writing his name, Phil White, his mark, and then put the X right there. That's the legal way to do it. So just imagine this. The clerk hands the pen to Phil. All right, make your mark, young man. Phil starts writing his name in cursive. You can just imagine the surprise and astonishment of that clerk. Like, what are you doing? And then Phil looks up. Excuse me, sir, but there's not enough room for me to put my entire signature here. Hands the pen back to the clerk. The clerk just scratches it out, hands the pen back to Phil. And then what's he do? He signs his name in the most eloquent way possible. Curly cues here. I mean, that beats mine all to hell. Tell you. Anyway, yeah. So this exemplifies what's possible. Okay, but first, you got to get through a war so that all Blacks can partake in one of the greatest rights that had previously been denied to them. Okay, and that's education. Believe it or not, I'm not going to cover the war. Let's just say they survived. About 25, 30% of them are impressed into the Confederate service. They are not handed Richmond rifled muskets. They are handed shovels and picks, all right, because they're going to build the forts and the trenches. All right. Yeah, so forget that rumor about armed Blacks in the Confederate Army. Wish they would die a quick death. All right, so the war ends. Government has a challenge. Right? There are 4 million freed, uneducated, and unemployed Blacks. What are they going to do? So the government, they devise and they establish the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands. We know it as the Freedmen's Bureau. In March of '65, before the war is even over, they're going to educate, they're going to feed the destitute, both Black and white in the South. They're going to make employment contracts. Okay, we'll focus on the education part of it. They're going to start free schools. The first public schools in Virginia start in 1865, not in 1870, like most people think after our new Constitution. But the South just lost the war. Do you think they're automatically going to want an educated Black citizenry? Right? Knowledge is power. You've got to look out for that. So because of that, first, freedmen schools, they're for whites also. Right? However, I looked through over 1,100 monthly teacher reports that were sent to the district supervisors. You current teachers think, you have paperwork? Well, it goes years back. All right. One of the questions they had to answer every month was, what is the public sentiment of the free Negro schools? Okay, that's how they put it. Out of those 1,100 that I looked at, there were 12 cases of where there were white students in the schools. Wouldn't that be a cool story, though, to dig into? So it's mainly all free Blacks now. So what I'm going to show next are 9 slides, very quick. You're going to see responses to that question, what is the public sentiment of all the counties around Prince Edward, 9 of them. You'll see a map of the state with Prince Edward in yellow and the county I'm certainly talking about in red. All you have to pay attention to is what's highlighted in red, because I'm going to highlight the key responses to that question. So let's just go to the first one here. All right, Bedford County. So there's Prince Edward, Farmville, and Israel Hill is right there on the Appomattox River. So Bedford County over here. I'll also have the original copy of what was written, but Rebs is going to turn us out. We will build one, that's another school, on a colored man place where we can enjoy without the Rebs interfering with us. And if so, we'll do that next September. George Miles is the teacher. He never does. Okay, the Rebs did turn them out. Campbell County, right there, generally opposed to it. I transcribe this as written. It's not my terrible English, all right? Charlotte County, very bitter. Lunenburg, no assistance or encouragement, the majority of whom, white citizenry, are opposed. Not away. School will have no friends. Amelia, state of feeling is by no means good. Better class of people better not act. Talk about intimidation. The Negroes had better be at work. Talk about threatening. Cumberland County, public sentiment not in favor. The masses would vote against the whole thing. Buckingham County, much bitter hostility. The next one is going to be Appomattox right here. A man named Bill Durfee, roadmaster on Southside Railroad, threatens to burn house if school is started. This is actually down, he lives down near Pamplin, southern part of the county. A schoolhouse was burnt in the Appomattox courthouse. Fanny Berry here. She was enslaved here in Appomattox County on the George Abbott plantation. This is what she thought of Bill Durfee 70 years later. Oh, Bill Durfee, old dog, I hate his name. I mean, you can just feel the venom coming out of that line there. Fanny Berry, just a firecracker of a woman. That quote is taken out of this book, Weevils in the Wheat. She takes up 20 pages of this book. Phenomenal read. All right. Yeah, Fanny. I'd love to sit on a front porch with her with a couple mint juleps. Wouldn't that be a, yeah, anyway. Okay, so statistically, Prince Edward County, in the middle of all this, should have very similar language, but it doesn't. There is no open hostility or opposition, no difficulties, much more favorable. What's going on here? Okay. I think it's due to the positive economic and social relations the free blacks in Prince Edward County had with the whites and compounded by Israel Hill. The only difference between Prince Edward County and all those other 9 counties is Israel Hill, right? Another anecdotal piece of evidence is found in the 1870 Federal Census. One of the questions asked of each household is who had attended school the previous 12 months. All right, let's look at the response from Appomattox County. There's 4 free black schools, 150 students through those 4 schools. You know how many people say they attended school? How many black students said they attended school? 8 out of those 150. Let's look at Prince Edward County. The one school in the town of Farmville itself that also took care of Israel Hill had 150 students. Talk about overcrowding. Of course, that was day and night classes. 150. How many on the census for that district said that they attended school? 98. All right, an obvious difference. And what I just said about Appomattox County, that is across the South. That's the type of statistics, the extreme underreporting that is done across the South. But Prince Edward, there's something different. To me, that implies that the free blacks there well, they're all free blacks, obviously, in 1870. There's a lot more trust. They're more comfortable with giving information to a white man who is usually the assistant marshal or assistant sheriff, okay, who 5 years earlier very well could have owned that person, all right? So, I mean, even today, who likes giving information to the feds? So imagine these blacks wanting to give information to a white man who had been an extreme authority. But in Prince Edward, there's obviously, they're just more comfortable and more trust. Like I said, that's anecdotal, all right? But I believe there's something there. So how does education manifest itself after the war? Good example of that, best example of that is Virginia Senator James Bland. Okay, he epitomizes what education can do for a woman or a man, no matter what their where they are in life, their economic status in life, social status in life. Okay, as the great philosopher Bob Dylan sang, "The times they are a-changin'." James here, he was born in Farmville. His dad, Hercules, bought his wife's freedom so that their children, including James, would be free. So James was born free. He works in his father's cooperage shop, a carpenter. He also works in one of the tobacco factories in Farmville. The war breaks out in 1864. He heads east to Norfolk and attends a free black school. He comes back after the war, 1867 to 68. He has been elected to the State Constitutional Convention to represent both Prince Edward and Appomattox counties. After that, he's elected to the Virginia Senate in 1869. And who's he replaced? Francis Watkins, one of those condescending newspaper columnists. He's the one who said the weaker must give way to the stronger and more enlightened. Well, tables have turned on Francis, haven't they? Yeah, I get a grin out of that. Okay, so while James is in the Senate, he's a super strong advocate for education, both for the free blacks and white education. He's also for suffrage rights for all, for free blacks and also for the disenfranchised Confederates. All right. 1870 is, I've always thought it's kind of the high watermark for Reconstruction and Black Enlightenment, because it's all going to come crashing down. And in James's case, literally. This middle drawing here is the aftermath of the third floor of our Virginia State House that came crashing down. Supreme Court was meeting, crashed down, killed 62 people, including James. All right, so very short-lived. He was not a radical Republican. If you read some of the memorial by the Lieutenant Governor, John Murray there. But with just 1 year in the Senate, how much of a legacy could James have? Well, he always put education first. He had put in one bill, and that bill was to incorporate the Butler School for the Negro Children in Hampton, Virginia, that had been going on, initiated by General Benjamin Butler. Incorporate it so they can get federal funding, and it's incorporated into the school, Hampton Normal Agricultural Institute, which is Hampton University today. Right. This passes 1 month after his death. Right. So 1870 is the high water mark. 1877, the last troops are pulled out of the South in Louisiana. But it's the 1883 Supreme Court decision, Stanley versus the U.S. No relation. That's the death knell to Reconstruction. All right. It nullifies the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. They say that is not the federal government's responsibilities, it's the state's responsibilities. So how's that going to work out down south for the black population and the rights being upheld? Well, not too well. So After 1870, Israel Hill, its zenith is probably in the 1920s. There's about 30 homes. They have their own school. However, their history of their genesis, their successes, that has also faded into the history's compost. Okay, there's still a few people living there still by the 1990s, just a couple, but they're still very proud of the fact that they are an Israel Hill, even though they aren't quite sure exactly of its genesis. All right. I'm a big believer in the want of a nail proverb. You know, that's the proverb of, for want of a nail, a horse lost a shoe. Therefore, the rider lost the message didn't get to the general lost the battle, therefore the king lost a kingdom, all because of want of a simple nail. Now, I apply that to history, okay? It's not an insignificant item like a nail, but it's a past event that our great-great-grandfather went through and how he handled that event, okay? He's going to hand that, how he handed that down to his son or daughter, okay? Who hands it down to their son or daughter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I call it the tendril strands of DNA, okay? That's coursing through all of us. It's how we respond to events. It's based on how our ancestors had. So we're going to fast forward now to recent history, 1950s, 1960s. For a Civil War historian, that is recent. Right. Frederick Douglass said it much better than myself, but well, it is not well to forget the past. Memory was given to man for some wise purpose. Okay. Lessons learned and forgotten. The lessons learned and forgotten, what I'm talking about there is the Black educational opportunities that were given to the free Blacks in Prince Edward in the 1860s. It was very progressive. Prince Edward stood out from all the surrounding counties. In 3 or 4 generations, all of that, and I mean all that, is going to be forgotten. And Prince Edward's going to stand out in the nation, but all for a so different reason. So for the sometimes I don't know what century I'm living in. Yeah, 1951. Okay, segregation, obviously, in the South, here in Virginia. Robert Moton Black High School, segregated. Had been built for half the number that were attending it in 1951. The other half are attending in literally tar paper shacks next to the impressive looking brick building. Okay, their textbooks, their hand-me-downs from the white schools, the white high school. They have no chemistry equipment. They have no shop equipment. They have very little phys ed equipment. All right. This is really gnawing at a 16-year-old junior woman. Okay. Barbara Johns. All right. She starts mumbling about it. She complains to a teacher. Now, teachers are really important in our lives, especially if you have a good one. This teacher looks at Barbara and just says, "Barbara, don't complain to me. What are you going to do about it?" So she got to thinking about it. And what's Barbara do? She gets the entire class or school population to strike. Okay, they walk out. Okay, April of 51. Now I'm not going to go into all the legal details, but eventually that's going to lead to one of the 5 lawsuits that make up Brown versus Topeka Board of Education, where the Supreme Court is going to overturn the Plessy-Ferguson separate but equal clause. Out of the 167 plaintiffs for that lawsuit, 117 are Robert Moulton High School students. Isn't that just great? Right. So segregation is overturned. It's going to lead to other court actions. Oh, Virginia still, they don't like it, and they still aren't going to integrate. 1959, they are told you have to integrate. They said, no, we aren't. So what do? They say, well, if we have to integrate, then we aren't going to have any schools. They close schools. Massive resistance is what it's called. Takes a little while, but most counties, all right, they give in. Okay, we're going to integrate. All counties but one in the entire state, Prince Edward, is going to stand out. They say, nope, we are not going to integrate our schools. We're going to remain closed. They remain closed for 5 years. 2,000 Black children are without school for 5 years. About 200 white children are without school for 5 years. The other white children can get tuition grants and attend private schools, not so for the Black students and for the lowermost income white students. Picture on the left there, that's taken in 63. For those of you who want to practice our constitutional right to protest, peacefully protest, we can take a lesson out of this sign here. I think this is great. Look at that. I've lost 4 years of education, why 5? But let's tell Russia about this. I mean, using our own propaganda against us. Yeah, that's just great. But I digress. Eventually, schools do reopen in 1964 after 5 years. They do so, it's accomplished with, there's no violence, there's no police dogs, there's no batons, there's no water cannons, okay? And because of that, also, there's not much media coverage, all right? But remember, this first started in 1951, years before a lot of other civil rights activists had started. So they eventually got what they wanted through the slow, methodical uses of the judicial system, just like their predecessors, ancestors did in Israel Hill and Prince Edward County. Though this took 13 years to get what they wanted, at least it wasn't the 15 years for Judith Randolph, where it took 15 years for her to manumit all her enslaved. I like to think that tendrils of historic DNA were coursing through Barbara and her classmates, you know, and that's why they went through this judicial system to get what they needed. Of course, that's just my sentimental side stating that, but there's no proof of that. But that's what I hope it's there. Now, I always was having a hard time figuring out how to close this, but the Virginia legislature decided it for me last month. Right. Every state in the union is entitled to 2 statues of prominent citizens that best represent their state in Statuary Hall in the nation's capital. Right. Virginia had chosen George Washington, and since 1909, I believe, Robert E. Lee. In July, the state legislature decided Robert E. Lee best did not represent everybody in Virginia in our ideals, and they took him out. So then they're trying to decide, all right, who are we going to replace Robert E. Lee with? Okay. when I read who they picked last month, I grinned like a Cheshire cat, you know, because it's Barbara Johns. Okay, so you suffered through commercial. Now you're going to suffer through some homework. When you're laying in bed tonight, I want you to think of Robert E. Lee as a bookend, Barbara Johns as a bookend, the antithesis of Robert E. Lee here, all right? What books are you going to infill between those two bookends? All right? Just think about that. Hopefully, one of them will be this, all right? Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
This is probably the best slide of the night. Yeah, this tells me two things. One is I'm going to enjoy a pint or two of my favorite. And if we're doing this live, like I said, we'd be at Three Roads Brewery there in Farmville, and the next round would be on me. You know? But we can't. We aren't. Therefore, so sorry. Yeah. The other thing it tells me is I'm done with my presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Kelly if there's any questions out there.
Thank you, Rod. That's a lot of really good information there. And we do have some questions. I know we're a little over time, but still want to take some of those questions.
Yeah.
So I know one of the early questions was if you could tell again how Bizarre got its name.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't go into that because no one knows for sure. But bizarre is a French word. It didn't imply what we think of bizarre as strange today. And actually, I'm forgetting exactly what the original French interpretation was, but no one really knows for sure. But it is bizarre, isn't it?
Okay. And in 1806, the Virginia legislature enacted a law requiring that any slave that was freed was required to leave Virginia within 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't always enforced or wasn't very often enforced. But did this law affect the freed people at Israel Hill?
Yeah, good question. No, it did not, though that was litigated. Remember, it took 15 years. Richard died in 1796, not freed into 1811. The judicial system looked at that and said, well, wait a minute, the will was written and Richard died in 1796 before the 1806 manumission law went into effect. So they were, I guess you could say they were grandfathered. And so they did not affect Israel Hill. Yeah.
And then there was a question about, did the word bateau have any special meaning other than that it is a French word for boat?
No, that's it. Yeah.
And I think primarily in the U.S. it was used to indicate a flat bottom boat.
Yes, it was, right. Yeah.
All right, let me see what else we've got. That was a really quick one to answer. So, and lots of good chat, lots of good references that people are throwing out there of other places to look.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Given the broader terms of property rights and legal rights of women in antebellum Virginia, do women appear as litigants in the local court records, and can we trace ways in which they may have engaged male advocates for legal needs? Very good question.
Yeah, yes, there is. If I don't know something, I'm not afraid to say I don't know. But there were just a few examples in this book of female free blacks litigating against other male free blacks and other female free blacks. but probably they make up 50% of the population. Certainly it wasn't 50% of the judicial use of the judicial system, however. Yeah.
And this may be a little bit out of your research area, Rod, but someone asked, what about the Tyne Institute in Mecklenburg County? And also Boydton Institute in Mecklenburg.
I do not know. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I'd like to know more about that, but yeah, do not know.
And a question, didn't Bland also want to build Virginia State on Israel Hill, but with his death, it moved to Petersburg?
Oh, interesting. That was not covered in the book. I don't know. I'd like to know that. Yeah. Yeah.
And then someone wants to know, what is the reasoning as to why Prince Edward County was the only school to contest integration when at one time they were one with integration?
Let's see. They were the only ones to contest it.
When you're talking about when the school shut down for 5 years?
Yeah. I mean, most counties in Virginia here did contest integration, but most of them, I believe there is, oh boy, it was 1964, and I can't remember the name of the decision that said, no, you must integrate again. Most counties did integrate at that time, but for whatever reason, Prince Edward, they just stuck to their guns. Yes, Charlottesville did schools also shut down. Right, I see that right there. Yeah, but Prince Edward, Charlottesville eventually did integrate before that '64 decision, but Prince Edward just stuck with it.
And what were the primary products brought to market by Bateau to Petersburg? Yeah. And did this commerce make Petersburg a boom town?
Yeah, cash crop of Virginia, tobacco. Okay, that was the main thing being brought down. Farmville was a tobacco town, along with Lynchburg. So it was mainly that. Coming back, also wheat and corn, but coming back, they were bringing back things obviously they couldn't get up there. Oyster shell for crops, coal, and then just mercantile goods from the stores that they could not get up here in the hinterlands. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I think that is the bulk of the questions. There was a lot in the chat, so it's wonderful to see people exchanging ideas and resources. And thank you so much, Rod, for this talk. One thing I forgot to mention, our next History Happy Hour will be on March 8th, and I will be talking about Rose Greenough, socialite, secessionist, and spy. But if you haven't registered for our symposium, certainly feel free, or please do sign up, because that's what we've got coming up next.
Hey,
Rod,
Kelly,
do you have one last thing?
Yeah. I just saw a question in the chat. It's basically asking, were there other communities, free Black communities in the South? That was a question. That was something that was always in my mind when I was doing this research. You know, was Israel Hill, was that the only one and only? And basically, nothing rose to the national prominence, especially in the media, as Israel Hill did. Okay. Now, there may have been other free Black, I'm not sure I want to call them communities, but enclaves established throughout the South. But someone had asked that question about the 1806 manumission law. A lot of owners that were manumitting their enslaved were afraid of that law, right? And especially if they had a great deal of free Blacks, right? So what most what it looks like what most were doing was sending them north, right? So I looked into that a little bit, and very close at hand was a case in Lynchburg, Frances Shackelford, 1859, she dies. The previous they'd set it up. The previous 5 years, her enslaved, about 44 of them, were working for wages, and they were keeping those wages. Such that when she dies in 1859, they were going to be sent north across the Ohio River to Ohio with their averaging $50 a piece. Okay, pretty pitiful wages for 5 years of work. I lose them in Wheeling, Virginia, and then they were set free in Ohio and just let loose. Okay, probably didn't turn out well for them. An example that turned out very well for them happens in Albemarle County, Charlottesville. A man, Edward Coles, he's a plantation owner. He inherits it along with about 20 enslaved. He was a student of William and Mary. He was also fully caught up in the Enlightenment movement. However, he knows he needs to complete his what work he is doing, because he is President James Madison's secretary. He ends that. He says, all right, it's going to take me a couple years, but eventually I'm going to sell this place, and I am moving out of this state because I cannot live in a state where slavery is free. Like I said, he really embraced the Enlightenment. So 1819, he heads northwest. He hits the Ohio River. He has a couple of flatboats made. He heads down the Ohio River. They beach it on the north bank of the Ohio, at the southern tip of Illinois. And in the Illinois state capitol, there's a beautiful large painting of that scene, because that's when he informs them, you're free. Right? They head north. They eventually settle outside the town of Edwardsville, which is right east of St. Louis. Edward Coles buys each of them 160 acres and all the farm implements they need, and they turn into extremely successful farmers because they're farming that beautiful Illinois land. Edward Cole, he is also successful. He becomes the second governor of the state. He also beats back, this is what's really pretty cool, he beats back 2 attempts for slavery to be legalized in Illinois. Now imagine if he hadn't attended William and Mary and really embraced that Enlightenment. History could be different. They name a county after him, Coles County, which is the home county of my undergraduate alma mater, Eastern Illinois University. So I love those 6 degrees of separation when it applies to history things. But one more, actually there were 2 more quick examples. One is Richard's brother John. He dies in the 1830s. He manumits his 380 enslaved. He buys them each 10 acres of land, about 3,800 acres, in Ohio, Mercer County, Ohio, right on the Indiana border. They head up there. They get off the canal boat on the Miami River, and there's a welcoming committee of German farmers. All right, but they're holding rifles and shotguns. They want to have nothing to do with these 380 previously enslaved in the South. So they scatter them. Okay, but they do eventually start some black town settlements, become mayors, highly successful businessmen in farmers. Others didn't turn out so well. As late as 1990s, descendants of those 380 are still trying to get their 3,800 acres back. Okay, but one more example is another absolute failure, and it's the largest Black communal experiment done. and it's done in New York. 1846, New York changes their constitution, and unlike most states in the Union who are loosening their suffrage laws, before you really had to be a landed gentry to vote. Virginia, by 1846, you barely had to own any land to vote. New York, they increase it for the Black male voters. Okay. Now all of a sudden, they have to own $250 worth of real estate. This really ticks off this rich abolitionist, very powerful abolitionist, Garrett Smith in New York. He buys 120,000 acres of land. He invites 3,000 Blacks living in New York City. Say, come on over. I'm going to buy you each 40 acres of land, or give you 40 acres of land. We're all going to farm. Well-intentioned, but like any chemistry experiment, you have to have the right ingredients. You have to have the right temperature, and none of those exist here. Just because you live in the 1800s doesn't mean you know how to farm. They come on out, and it's late April, so the timing's all going to be off. They've got to clear the land. They've got to build a home. They've got to plant crops. By now, it's winter time. And where is this land? It's in the Adirondacks, okay, right outside Lake Placid. It is cold up there, all right? Within 2 years, it is an utter failure, okay? You can go visit it today, though. There's one of those farms was a great success. It was John Brown's farm, John Brown of Harper's Ferry. He was a huge proponent of all of that, but nothing else exists there now. So that was a case of a pure failure of it. I guess you could say an experimental community of free Blacks. But anyway,
well,
yeah.
Thank you, Rod. Those are some great examples. Thank you all for tuning in tonight, and hopefully we'll see you at the symposium. So good night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.